Hello, nerds, and welcome. You are watching Crossing the Nerdverse. I'm Ryan, and I am joined by my fantastic co-hosts, Eric and Clark, for what I think might be the most unique episode we've ever done on Crossing the Nerdverse. And it's all Clark's fault, so...
Picked a topic.
Yeah.
Nobody said no. This is their fault as well. I was left unmanaged.
In my defense, I was unsupervised.
Exactly.
We are on take 2. Hopefully, the tech issues are slowly getting weeded out.
Yeah, it's on.
So, and I know Eric didn't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. As we start tonight's episode, guys, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to tell you that more so than most of our episodes, this is going to be a spoiler-ridden episode. Spoilers for things that you may have tucked away for a later date. Because tonight we are doing Romantasy in the Nerdverse. We are doing romantic fantasy genres. We're going to be spending the vast majority of our time on Romantasy books, but there will be reference to things that are pretty similar, things that you find like Dragon Age, for example. Very much, I think, falls into this category. And so, if you have a stack of
TBRs.
rainy day TBRs next to your bed or on a shelf somewhere, this may not be the episode for you. And if you want to catch up on this one later, of course, we will be uploaded across all of our sweet platforms on our Linktree, on Twitch, on YouTube, and of course on Spotify and all of its associated peers. So normally we would start off with kind of reading, writing, playing, but tonight is just all about the reading mostly. So Clark.
Hold on.
Eric's got a finger.
Yeah, because I don't read a lot, so I'm going to be probably quiet during this. But one thing I will say with playing, Steam Deck, worth it. Battery, kind of short, not the best. But if you do a lot of stuff with... Yeah, I got to chew on something. If you do a lot of stuff with like Steam itself, because I know some people, like I got free games on Amazon and things. I don't have any of that hooked up. I just have Steam because it's mostly what I use. And it's good. I enjoy it. It's kind of big, so you got to get used to it. You almost have to work your hands out a little bit. But if you don't want a true gaming rig, it's not a bad alternative, I have found. Like, it runs Baldur's Gate pretty well.
I was going to say, have you found anything that you haven't been able to run yet?
Well, it lets you know, like, the nice thing is it's got a nice system. So it's got, like, the circle line, can't play it. The yellow triangle, it tells you, like, different discrepancies with it. And then the green means that it's good, like, and it's been, like, adapted to the Steam Deck.
See, that's kind of nice. I like that.
Yeah, they do a lot. I know it's been out a while, but I finally got to mess with it, so it's pretty good. That's all I got. Nice. I'm not reading anything. I don't really read words.
All right, well, let's do it this way. Instead of going through the whole gambit, let's have Eric, who, as you can tell by our titles, guys, is our non-smut reader. He has very little experience with romantic fantasy as a genre. So, Clark, you are the head of our smut reading department here. Instead of what you're currently reading, do you have kind of a recommendation? This is what I recommend to get into the door, so to speak. Something a little mild where you get to kind of test the water.
Mild, you say?
Mild.
I think everyone's gut reaction is to go ACOTAR, and while I feel like it was probably the pioneer in popularizing this genre most recently, it's really hard to tell somebody to read like that much book. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The last one is thick. So that one's a bit hard for me to be like, oh yeah, just jump right into it. I think it does represent the genre very, very well because there's fantastic world building in it. There's fantastic character development in it. What we see a lot of, like, in the female main characters are all very strong, but they have realistic flaws. The male characters are very strong, but also have like flaws. So they're not perfect people and things do happen. So I think that's a good one, but it is very long. I think Divine Rituals is a fantastic duology to kind of jump into this space. Same with Kingdom of the Wicked. It's a 3-book series, and I think so. Kingdom of the Wicked is like the 7 sins of hell is a brother. So not really a spoiler. You learn that pretty quickly in the book. But like I think she's now writing about some of the other brothers, so they're getting a spin-off. But the main series is a 3-book, I want to say. Because it's Kingdom of the Wicked, Kingdom of Wrath, and something something. But like that's a good one where it's not hello Jenkins. It's not centered. Smut is not the plot. Smut is a ancillary enhancer to the plot, where there's like still really good plot. The plot twists happen. Like they still have pretty decent world building.
You're legitimately reading it for the articles,
yes,
as
and
it were.
like I'm sure a lot of people out there are thinking like, "Oh, Fourth Wing," and as much. And I know this is a spoiler, and this is personally an opinion. The first Fourth Wing book in the Imperium series, I read in a weekend. Like I plowed through that book. The second book was
euphemism. We need a euphemism counter, like in the corner somewhere.
I know. Give you an innuendo. So, like, I plowed through the first book. The second book, Iron Flame. Oh, that was a slog. I couldn't get over the miscommunication trope, and by like page 200 I was just done and annoyed, and I finished it and I was sad about it, but like Rebecca Yarros really needs to pick it up in the third book, in my personal opinion. I have friends who loved the second book just as much as the first one, but there were tons of plot holes for me. So that's my very long-winded recommendation for how to get into this genre. And if you want something that's super cute, Assistant to the Villain is very fucking adorable. It is just like a super good, easy read. Not have there. I don't think there's any smut per se in the first one, but there are kind of like, ooh, he cute kind of vibes. And I think the second one comes out this year.
If nobody could tell, very passionate about the topic.
Indeed. Well, and that's actually kind of the fun,
Spend a lot of my time
part of it. And that is how she got to be head of our smut reading department here at Crossing the Nerdverse. So yeah, I think
Aren't you proud of me, Mom?
Right. That's an interesting kind of array for a recommendation. It's a lot of more modern work than I anticipated.
I'm not going to recommend the Ice Barbarian series, unfortunately.
Barbarella it is. But no, yeah, and you know, that's kind of the reason that we talk about this tonight, right? Is we are seeing a huge surge in the Romantasy subgenre, especially all across a lot of our social media accounts. Things like TikTok have entire sections of just book talk that are talking about books like this and similar works. And I did mention at the beginning of the episode, of course, we're going to be covering some stuff that's not literature related as it comes up, but we are going to be spending most of the episode tonight in written word, in literature. And so I agree with Clark's assessment. I am not quite all the way through ACOTAR, which is why I'm holding on to the reins for dear life for our spoilers of this episode. I'm going to try to dance around that as much as I can.
I just know I just don't talk about the orange book. Like, that's fine.
Now what's interesting is for me as our assistant smut reader here, I got into the subgenre when I was a teenager, and I started reading without really knowing what I was getting into. I just found some cool fantasy books that had werewolves and vampires in them and kind of ran with it, right? And so this was not to date myself any more than my gray beard already is, but this was before the days of the Twilights and the social acceptable.
Oh yeah, I guess Twilight would qualify as a romantasy, but I never read Twilight.
We don't talk about that.
So
such a god awful series.
That being said, I do
You've
before I get into my recommendations.
People very angry.
Yeah.
Come at me. Vampires don't fucking twinkle.
I have a whole host of theories on that one that we can cover if we
Doesn't he
need
wear
some.
like a ring or something, and that makes him sparkle in the sun?
No. That's the TV show that my wife watches all the time.
Oh,
The originals. They have a ring that makes them like they can go out in
oh, okay.
daytime.
Oh.
All right. So romantasy as a genre. Before I get into my recommendations, I want to explain to everybody that's watching that might not understand exactly what we're talking about because this isn't our normal forte. What we're dealing with, and it literally is just romantic fantasy. It is a romance novel generally set in a fantasy setting that has been written and rewritten so many times that it's started to develop its own, I don't know, what would you call them, Clark? Tropes? Flavors?
Yeah, I
That,
mean, you have some pretty tropes is a good word, like enemies to lovers,
yeah.
or the things that's a very common one, or like the one bed at the inn. That's a pretty common trope that you'll run into. Like I said, the miscommunication trope happens. There's a enemies to lovers seems to be the largest one.
Well, and enemies
But
to lovers, most everybody that belongs to a nerdverse has been introduced to an enemies to lovers story in some variation. Because my personal favorite enemies to lovers is the kidnap stories, where powerful being has kidnapped poor innocent young protagonist. Because it's
Beauty
just
and the
beauty.
Beast,
It's Beauty and the
enemies
Beast.
to
Yeah,
lovers.
it's enemies to lovers. It's exactly what Beauty and the Beast is. You know, the Beast kidnaps her
Oh my
dad.
god, that's
She
actually
goes to
your first
Yeah,
romantasy is
it's the
probably.
first romantasy. I was 8 years old watching Beauty and the Beast. Um,
And you,
and so what's up?
I was gonna say, I must have froze. I thought you did, but I must have. Good thing we're recording, so that way I
Yeah.
can fix it later. Sorry.
So yeah, a lot of our Disney tropes fall into this, right? You have enemies to lovers with Beauty and the Beast. You have the Prince Charming stories with Snow White and with Cinderella,
The
and
damsels in distresses,
yeah.
and yeah.
And so
Yeah, but
realistically, when we're dealing with romantasy, that's kind of your fundamentals, right? Is Disney movies, not the modern stuff as much,
yeah, I was gonna
but
say you got to look at the older stuff where it's a little bit more like they're super grim in the beginning, and then they get
yeah,
more
we'll
huggy
say
friendly.
pre-Pixar acquisition Disney
Yeah,
covers a
Yeah,
lot of this.
like early
Now,
one
'90s.
parent Disney.
yeah, one parent Disney. Um, and so that's kind of what we're dealing with is you have a character that is thrust into a wild situation outside of their control usually and interact with beings of incredible power and sexiness. Um, and that's the real kicker is everybody that really thrashes against this subgenre almost as a knee-jerk reaction, especially across social media, where they say things like, "I can't believe it's so popular. It's just porn," or corn. I guess we're gonna stay happy with the algorithm. They don't realize that it's the Disney movies. It's nearly everything that we grew up with as millennials or late Gen X's, and
I mean, I'm going to say they're more adult versions of
yeah,
Disney
obviously
movies,
we're dealing with a little
but
bit more of an adult
I mean,
version,
like,
but
I have a Captain Hook retelling. So yeah, it's basically let's just spoof this and put a little spin on it. Hooked. Okay, 4 out of 10 stars.
yeah. Now,
Whoa.
so now that we've explored the genre a little bit, whoa, our chat is exploding. What do we got
Oh
here?
no.
Lots to talk about Fourth Wing.
Bones
But
wants to know if someone's gonna read to him the one of the books that you all mentioned. Oh,
Well,
Icebreaker.
oh,
Icebreaker.
I don't own any of the Icebreaker Barbarians. I read one and I was like, ooh, no. Like Nora Roberts paved the way for the smut genre as we know it. That woman put in work.
Yeah.
She cranked out so many Bridgerton like books, just one after the other. So like that to me, Ice Barbarians is like the fantasy version of Nora Roberts.
Okay, so
But that's just me.
let me ask you this: when we're dealing with, because you brought up Bridgerton, I was going to do this later in the episode, but I'm going to cover it right out of the gate now that it's out there. So Bridgerton has been a hot topic around my house recently. It's not one
Yeah, it
that I've
has.
watched, but I did bring up. I watched. So here's the layout, right? I watched a TikTok because that's how all the best stories start nowadays. I watched a TikTok, and all it was this skit where this normal dude, just everyday kind of guy, sits down and he watches an episode of Bridgerton just because it's blowing up. Everybody's talking about it. Like, I got to see what this show's about. And he sits down and he's got like his cup of coffee or whatever, and then it says Bridgerton episode number 2, and he comes in, he's got like a turtleneck on, and he's kind of fancied up. He's
It's
got a
like
glass
day
of wine.
1 of watching
Yeah.
Bridgerton. It's like day 5, you're talking with a British accent. Yeah.
You got your teacup, right? So I actually, because we're recording today, I had to turn it down, but I got an invite to go to a Bridgerton like in costume watch party
Yeah.
with a tea party and everything going on, and
Oh
I
my
was
God.
legitimately excited about it. Like, I legitimately wanted to check it out. I don't know anything about Bridgerton other than what my wife has told me during the conversations, but I was going to go full bore. Like, I have a twin-tailed coat and a doublet
It's
and
good.
the whole 9 yards. So when it comes to Romantasy, because if we're going to talk about who paved the way, I want to bring up Jane Austen. If we're going to count period pieces, turn of the century period pieces.
See, that's my thing is like, I don't know if I consider those romantasy because
There's
it's
not a
still,
fantasy element, right?
yeah, to me, they're like historical romances, if that makes sense. That's why I'm like, Nora Robert, like, she walked so that we could have fairies, basically.
Yeah, that's
so
a
that
fact,
we
actually.
could be like, what if they were bats? So that's why I'm just kind of like, I wouldn't put Bridgerton in the romantasy genre because to me it's not high fantasy. There's no fae, there's no,
I agree
outside
with
of money, there's no power at B, but like it's still really freaking good and it's very well done as a historical romance.
Well, but it does capture the flavor, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
it's kind of the same thing.
It's
If you're
spicy.
gonna, it's spicy. It's got a kind of an ethereal nature to the way everything is done. And ultimately, I think a lot of them are identified. When I think about it, if I was going to try to break it down as an author, right, a key element for romantasy and similar works like historical romance is going to be a wish fulfillment aspect to it. It's going to be, I'm going to create the perfect partner, whether it's male, female, half horse, whatever. It happens, man. They're out there.
I got some over on this. No, I'm kidding. I don't have any half horses.
But
There's
in that,
Narnia.
yeah, in that kind of path where they're writing this wish fulfillment kind of thing, we get a really humorous subtrope in the fact that all of our really heavy romantic interests, the ones that are going to end up in the spicy chapters, have these behaviors that are entirely unacceptable if you were to apply them in real life.
I love the meme where it's just like my morally gray book boyfriend can say this, but like somebody tries to say this to me in real life and smack down. Because that 90% of this behavior would not fly for anybody in reality, but it's okay because it's a book.
And I think it stands out because we were joking before the episode that this is also kind of the realm where we get a lot of the jokes about how authors can't write certain ways. And so there's a whole subcommunity that are like, men should not be allowed to write fantasy because there's a lot of us that wrote, and then she bounced down the stairs boobily and her bosom swelled with anticipation. And it's like,
she breasted across the room. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get a lot of this.
I'd read that.
So all then right, so I have some other book recommendations?
We have Eric on the hook. Yeah. One of the things we're doing tonight for everybody that's tuning in, we are trying to sincerely convince Eric to read a romantasy book. So far we've only managed to kind of skirt the surface. I want to get some hooks into him, but now all that being said, I'm gonna get to my recommendations.
Yep.
I'm not quite as hip as Clark. That's why she's the head and I'm just the assistant. Hey, euphemism count number 4. I'm going to recommend 3 different series. And they are depending on what type of reader you are. Now, that's one thing that took me far too long, even as a writer, like as an author, it took me far too long to realize that people have different reading styles and different reading commitments. And that's why I have these 3. And so if you were the type of person that wants a one and done, I'm going to call it a one night stand for euphemism count number 5. If you want a one night stand book that you can get through very easily, that isn't overly laden or too heavy, that doesn't get too spicy to make things uncomfortable and make you feel like you're just straight up reading corn, I'm going to recommend Blood and Chocolate.
And he'll know if you watched the movie.
And I mean the book, not the abortion that was the movie.
Ooh, that's a thick word.
I would have gone with bastardization, but all right.
So Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Claus was, I think, probably my intro into the subgenre in literature. It is not a heavy book. It is not the part of a larger series that I'm aware of. It was a great one and done werewolf romantasy book. And yes. So when it comes to the romantasy there,
Bride,
Eric,
if you're looking for a werewolf one,
yeah,
Bride is pretty solid, one and done.
werewolves, vampires, and fairies are your three big hitters in
Mm-hmm.
romantasy. Like if you were going to have
Fae, yeah.
non-human interaction, yeah, fae specifically. I use the term fairy as an umbrella
That's
because
fair, okay.
yeah. But that's what you're looking to get into if you're getting into non-human interaction, right? It's going to be vampires, werewolves, and fae as you're kind of open. I would say
Shapeshifters?
shapeshifters, angels, and demons are a
Yeah.
close second squad, right? Like you got to get kind of deep into the game before you start dealing with shapeshifters and stuff.
Oh, no.
What?
And again, why Clark is the head of our department.
They had that really crazy show on Sci-Fi or whatever. I don't know what they call it now, the channel, because I don't watch real TV ever. I'm
Okay.
trying to think of what it was. Where that one, and it was basically smut, and they were all like fae and werewolves and everything like that. It was on Sci-Fi. It was a show. Can't
I
think of
don't
the
know.
name of it. And it was basically just smut because she would like entice people all the time. Oh man,
They
I'm
do
not
have
familiar.
sirens.
yeah,
Those...
I think that's what she was, and it wasn't common. I'm gonna find it.
You
YouTube.
know what's actually, now that he brings that up, I'm going to tangent just a little bit here. We were so on track for a while, and now it's my fault. You don't see a lot of siren mermaid literature. There's some, and there's some good ones, but you don't see a lot of siren mermaid.
Eh,
You think is it an anatomical problem?
kind of, but also
Yeah.
I'm trying to think the only, like, siren type character that I've run across is in the Coven, and they're witches that generate their power from basically, like, sensuality, so they kind of, like, lure people in to regenerate their power that way.
Okay.
But I really haven't run across anybody with, like, and I think so. And this kind of goes into one of my things about, like, my enjoyment of the romantasy is, like, you have very strong female characters. It's no longer damsels in distress. Like, a lot of these female characters we're seeing, they're the main characters. They come out swinging a sword. They have their little training arcs. They become powerful deities in and of themselves. So, like, yes, while they have powerful counterparts, they can stand alone. Not Game of Thrones, Throne of Glass is probably the best representation, I think, of having just this, like, mega powerful female character who didn't even know she had powers, but, like, grows up and is still strong in her own right. I think the siren trope gets rid of that power because it's now no longer choice, it's manipulation, so there's no consent. Consent is verbal, and, like, a big part of romantasy is verbal or kind of, like, very, very heavily pointed at, like, yes, I am consenting to this activity. Everyone has the right to say no to things, and that's constantly, like, reinforced. And I think the siren trope takes that out because if you are lured, there is no consent in that action. So I think that's probably why you don't see it as much.
Yeah, I
Maybe?
agree with you. And in fact, a lot of the books where you can see coercion happen, it's very much a tool of the villains, right? Like if you have mind control or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that, it's generally seen as like it's kind of like when you watch a movie and somebody kicks a dog, right? Like you know they're the bad guy of the movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of that kind of jam. All
Yes,
Lost
right,
Girl.
so
Eric.
That's what it was.
Kicking
Lost Girl.
dogs?
No, Lost Girl.
Oh.
The like show I watched that was basically the smut we're all talking about.
Oh, there you go.
And she was a succubus, not a siren. My bad.
I
That makes
mean,
more sense.
it's a
I
nighttime
mean,
siren.
yeah. Now, for my second recommendation, this is for readers that want a really encompassing kind of entry into the genre. And the reason I recommend this one is because it is a 3-book series. and each book is told from a different perspective of one of the three main characters. And each of them are different kind of flavors in the genre, between a very sultry, kind of teasing aspect to a very punk rock aspect to a very kind of combat adrenaline aspect. And that's going to be the Sisters of the Moon Otherworld series by Yasmin Galanor. And the three that I recommend, of course, in the Otherworld series are Witchling, Changeling, and Darkling. And it's fantastic intro. Again, it's not super spicy. I'm thinking one chili, right?
Did he just become a robot for you?
Okay, good. So yes, he did freeze. So it's not just
all
me
right.
this
So it's
time.
his fault.
Yeah.
It's gonna point at his little square. I don't know if his square is in the same spot as it is for you.
No, but I'm seeing it on the thing, so you're definitely pointing to him on the live shows.
Yeah.
My screen, though, I'm on a different side.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So it's all good, though. But in regards to this craziness that he speaks of, what was this second one called? 3 books?
It was 3 books, and he started explaining them. Oh, and he's gone.
He'll be back. All right. Here's my question. Did you read Blood and Chocolate?
I did not. I've never heard of that book. So that's a Ryan book. I will consider myself new age romantasy reader. I got into it because one of my friends who has like extreme ADHD, she reads like 4 books at a time. I can't figure out how.
Oh my god.
She's like, this is my workbook and this is my drive home book. And I'm like,
what drive home book?
She's the passenger. Yeah, like I jumped in with Akhtar and then I've just like been burning through them because I like fantasy. So like this was just another realm of fantasy. And like a point that I wanted to bring up earlier was that like I really appreciate what this genre is doing for like women in fantasy. So I pulled a Ryan and looked up numbers and math and statistics and things. So in 2020, I know. I did homework. And if being a part of the romantasy thing, you would like to be called a good girl for doing the homework. So
always a plus.
In 2023, of the best-selling sci-fi and fantasy top 100 books, 58 of them were authored by women, with like a stunning 18 of the top 20 titles were all authored by women in the sci-fi and fantasy. Compared to 2019, there were only 3 female authors in the top 20 and only 20 authors in the top 100. So we've like doubled it. So I think it's been huge for female authors to have this kind of voice and to portray, because like I can't even say they portray strong female characters. Like the male characters are pretty freaking badass too. Like they're just all around well written, and nobody ever writes like he walked down the stairs and his thing jangled in the breeze. Like nobody writes like that. I do find some of the terms and euphemisms that they have like very funny, and sometimes it has like turned me off from a book because I'm like, if I hear his length one more time, I'm done. Like pick a new word, like every like just his longing, and I'm like, okay, whatever. We're adults. Call it what it is. But yeah, in that regards, I really enjoy that, and I enjoy how many like women are now reading these fantasy books and are into high fantasy because, oh my gosh, I forgot her name. Oh my god, I'm going to say that completely wrong. Victoria Aveyard. She writes Realmbreaker, so this is not a romantasy, but she does have the Red Glass series, Red Queen series. That's a romantasy, but like if you read that and then go into Realmbreaker is a really good, just regular fantasy. Same with Prairie of the, I'm gonna say that, I can't say that word to save my life. Prairie of the Orange Tree. That's a beefy book. That has an ungodly amount of world building, but also very good. And usually where people like jump to. So I'm very excited for what it's doing for like women in the space. Go
So
us.
I was gonna say, do you think more people are comfortable with reading it and stuff like that because it's not just some short romancy book like with like the blonde haired guy on the front of it? So like now you got the
Yeah,
world building, so like there's more to it.
I think
Because I've
it
never read
feels
either
more
one.
like reading literature because like they have world and like the Sarah Moss, she does Akhtar, Throne of Glass, and Crescent City. Like she's actually made a stacking multiverse. So like that's why they're so engaging. Is it's not only just like okay, yeah, like nothing. To me, the old romance ones with like Fabio waving his hair
That's the
on
name
like
I
the
was looking
front,
for.
yeah. I think his name is actually Fabio, but I don't know. It's like one guy who does all the covers.
Yeah, he did a lot of the
And
covers
his
way back.
hair is stunning.
Yeah, I
But
was
like,
jealous.
oh, for sure, I was jealous. I was like, how do I get locks like that? But it's like, it's no longer just like, okay, I know they're going to end up together. Like they're on the cover. Like they might have something kind of happen in between, but like good things are going to happen to them. Whereas half of these books, you don't know. You're hoping, and it's like
Right.
a lot of the times they like fake you out. Like I will, if you have not read past the second book of Akhtar, if you have only read A Court of Thorns and Roses and have not gotten to Mist and Fury, please cover your ears. So they like to fake you out. You think Tamlin is like the number one love interest, and then it turns out he's shitty, and Tampon can go get flushed. Like, don't do that because it's bad for your septic system. But, like, he does not turn out to be the love interest. So, like, they fake you out a lot of the times with, like, fake love interests, which is another good plot twist
Well, I
that I
mean,
enjoy. Because
as
then I'm
much as
like, ooh, who is it?
I hated Twilight, I mean, realistically, you kind of
Even Twilight
figured,
was bad writing.
yeah, you kind of figured that the vampire and her would get together, but like they made it. I thought it was at least the movies. I didn't read the books, and I had to watch the movies against my will, um, favors and stuff. But so I actually thought there was a chance with the werewolf at one point. Like they really did a good job. Like I think with that. Um,
I've only ever read excerpts of Twilight, but I will say, this is much more like higher level writing. Like, there are words that I see in this book that, like, I'm like, oh crap, I've read a lot and I have to go figure out what this is. Like, there was some word for like a breastplate that I had never heard of and I had to go look it up. I don't think I had to look up any words in like 50 Shades of.
I mean, you weren't supposed to. You were supposed to look up images. That's really what that was at the end of the day. But you wanted to know the
Well,
different things they were using and stuff. Like you had to look it all up. Like how are people
and
going to
he
design their
said
own
he
red room?
doesn't want to read Romantasy.
I tried.
Yeah.
It's
I couldn't
50
get through that book.
Shades with pointy ears.
I could get through that book though. Like I got into it. Like I started reading it because everyone was talking about it. I was like, I'll give her a go. I
Sold
was like,
almost as many copies as the Bible.
I mean, just. Anyways, I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah, so I apologize for dropping, guys. My internet's a little unstable apparently. Sure, I'm glad I came back into that conversation though. That must have been fun while I was gone.
Well, I took
Uh,
the opportunity to rattle on about how the romantasy genre has lifted female authors in the fantasy space. And I was proud of myself, and I did research just like you, and I had numbers and things and stats, and you
hey,
missed
no,
it.
that's
So,
fantastic, and you're not wrong. It really has done an amazing job for opening the door on a lot of those kind of things. Um,
so
Anything to
your
get.
recommendations.
so
There's a
yes,
trilogy that I really want to
yeah.
know what it is.
So the Sisters of the Moon
Sisters
Otherworld
of the Moon.
trilogy by Yasmin Galenorn. This one is the one that I recommend, and apparently if this part came through and I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But I recommend this one because it's 3 books. It's Witchling, Darkling, and Changeling that really give a good gambit as far as the romantasy genre because it's told from the 3 different perspectives of your 3 main characters, and they come off very, very differently because you have Witchling, which is a lot more kind of sultry, teasing kind of fare, Darkling, which is a lot more adrenaline combat kind of enemies to lovers kind of vibe, and then Changeling, which is real punk rock, and you get that kind of like Pretty Woman vibe where it's a woman out of her place, right? And she has to learn how to exist in this new social status. Again, when you start dealing with books like ACOTAR, that's a main component in that, is that your protagonist is taken away from her realm of familiarity and thrust into a realm of alien rule and alien law. And so Yasmin Galenorn, again, these are very, very mild examples as far as Romantasy goes, guys. This is not super spicy corn books. You're talking 1 chili on the heat scale. Like, these are very entry level to the books. And then my last one, and this is for my voracious readers. These are the ones that want the comfort and familiarity of a series that will outlive them. They want to read the same thing for 10 years. And that is the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. Again, it is not super spicy, but it does cover the gambit of vampires and werewolves and skinwalkers. And it's all done through a really strong female lead who is native born. And it's a fantastic series of stories. Highly recommend it. And those are kind of my entry levels to kind of cover the gambit of different types of readers.
Bones are ever reliable. Recommended. Triceratops and Bottoms.
Triceratops. Is he doing Chuck Tingle now? Like, are we just diving right in?
That was Lola Faust who did that one. Also wrote Wet Hot Allosaurus.
Allosaurus Summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some recommendations from Bones.
Dinosaur Erotica.
Right.
2.6 stars out of 186 reviews on Amazon. Oh my god.
There we go.
This is another 90s, just 90s cover. I do like what they have done with the Romantasy covers. Like, to be fair, I'm a sucker for anything with a serpent, a sword, a crown, or like, like rose vines. I'll buy it. I'm in. You had me at rose vines. That's like 90% of these covers, I think. But yeah, they have gotten way better than some of this 90s.
When it comes to Romantasy, I would say there's a distinct difference. Yeah. There's a distinct difference between reading a Romantasy novel and reading like kind of straight up erotica. I think Romantasy spends a lot more time on the world building and kind of the reason why behind everything goes. You get a lot less of the, wet, hot Allosaurus Summer, as it were. Although I must admit, at least you know exactly what you're getting when you buy that book.
There's a third one called How Stego Got His Groove Back.
Fantastic.
These are important books. Like these. Oh yeah. Eventually.
Literature that will last the ages.
I can't wait for historians to dig these out of the dirt in my house.
I was going to say, that's probably what's going to happen. They're going to be digging up things, and like the books that survive are going to be the things you least expect. So like 3,000 years from now, they're going to be reading those and be like, this is what they used to read. No wonder.
Imagine if they do that and they think, oh yeah, those 2020 people, and this was their entire culture. This is all they really centered about. I wonder if they'd ever actually seen a dinosaur. Is this evidence that dinosaurs were amongst them in the early 20th century or early 21st century? Like, good.
They'd be like those savages.
Yeah, those savages. That's our cave paintings.
All right, one other thing I do want, we talked about, I think is very important that we should go over it, and Clark is absolutely not ready to do this again, but I think she did it very well in the beginning. We should talk about this young adult thing for people.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's important, because after she explained it to me, I will now not just buy my kid a young adult book. I will now take the time if she wants to read a series to verify it, because I thought young adult meant not that it would be like little kids. Young adult, I figured, teens. Nothing that would be too crazy. But yeah, I'll just let you explain it, Clark, like what you were reading, because I think it's important for parents to know this, because like I said, I will now be supervising a little bit better.
Another piece of homework I did, good girl number 2. So
euphemism count number 7.
Exactly. So a lot of these books, and including like the Throne of Glass series, the Cruel Prince series, several other of them, I've found in like the Barnes and Noble YA section. And from my understanding, young adult, I assumed like 18 to 25. Actually, the target market is like 9 to or 12 to 18
Yep.
is who constitutes for young adult YA books. That to me is a big maturity gap, like in terms of things that you're like ready to hear about or, experience in books. And they actually did a study, and more than half of YA books buyers are over the age of 18, with a majority of those being between the ages of 30 and 44. So, like, if you think about that, I fit into this demographic. I am that 30-year old who is like, oh, yeah, this looks like a great fantasy book. And, like, I have yet to run into a book that I've picked up in that genre where, like, oh, yeah, 12-year-old me would be cool reading this. So, yeah, just as a, like, FYI, when you're tootling through the YA section, it might behoove you to read some of the reviews or to go find a spicy index for that book because, like, yeah, I thought YA was much older than 12 because I don't
Well,
consider a 12-year-old a young adult.
so here's the interesting part. When it comes to the rules on YA, and I'm working on my first YA novel right now.
Mm-hmm.
It is so muddy and indistinct that they can kind of get away with anything they want to get away with, and it's really a good indicator on not just the publishing and like the publishers company, but also these bookstores on how much time they're putting into it and how much they actually know their stock, because it's supposed to be a 12 to 18 demographic. That's what YA is supposed to be. It's that, kind of you're done reading your preteen stuff, even though in my opinion preteen still kind of hits in YA, and you're wanting something that is more, to use, I guess the film is more PG-13, right? There's going
Coming
to
of
be,
age kind of
yeah,
stuff.
I would say you would probably be expecting strong language, evidence of violence, probably not gore as much, but definitely the knowledge of a separation between life and death, and that the stakes actually carry permanent ramifications. That's kind of I guess, the key points in YA, but you're still dealing with things in a way that's very digestible, that's a little
Fades to
more,
black.
yeah. And so even when you do have any kind of romance that is happening, you're never going to get explicitly described scenes. You're going to get FTB scenes, where they fade to black, and that's like at the extreme levels, right? Where they hand in hand slip into the back room, still kissing as the door closed behind them, kind of descriptions. And then you go to the next chapter. Now, I would say ACOTAR, as far as a spicy index, is not an overly spicy book, but it's definitely spicier than it should be for a YA section. And it's not something I would write about in any of my books, right? I think because of the muddy nature, it actually kind of is a bad thing for the genre. Because I have friends that I talk to on a daily basis that vehemently hate the entire classification of young adult. They won't read it. And I'm talking books that were even majorly popular, like things like Harry Potter, which is a YA series.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, Harry
Yeah,
Potter being
Like,
YA, that was,
that's YA.
well, and that's why the books are
or,
written the way
yeah.
that they were, right? You have book one, main character's 11. By the end of it, main character, well, not the end of it, but by the end of the primary arc, main character's what, 16, 17, right? You get to follow them through that whole journey through the
That's what
teenage
I'm
years.
trying to think. I think like 17 is maybe the youngest main
Yeah.
character I can think of in one of the Romantasy books, and then they almost immediately jump to 18.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of
I'm
the
trying
setup.
to think
And
of
so when
how
you
old
start,
Farah was at the beginning.
she
17,
was
18?
19. She was 19.
19? Okay.
I remember thinking that because I started reading these books And my brain went, nope, she's 19. Time out, red flag. Like, I ain't dealing with a 19-year-old. Ain't happening.
They're very mature for their age.
Yeah, very mature
because
for
of
their age.
trauma.
Definitely not just damaged.
Because of trauma, like
well,
the
and
rest of us.
yeah, that's where we start getting into a lot of the conversations that happen when you start talking to your friends about these, right? ACOTAR, Twilight, and many books like this, you get age discrepancy that's so severe that it's just kind of tossed in there as a descriptor, where it's like, yes, she was 16, young and brilliant and beautiful, and he was 344.
But to what I like to think is it just takes men 500 years to mature to the same
Right?
level as a 19-year-old girl. So, they're technically emotionally the same.
Well, and if I can be so bold as to step into something that's a little controversial here, I honestly think that's why the romantasy genre has become so popular, is because it's so easy to argue about gender stereotypes and gender roles in these books. I think people are looking for an excuse to be angry about anything they can be, and this is very low-hanging fruit. And so when I started reading ACOTAR, I got it off the recommendation of three people that I respect very, very much. And I couldn't believe how the men were portrayed and described in these books. A little spoiler warning without context, the perfect man in this book, this wish fulfillment perfect image of a male, is tall, dark, brooding, but not afraid to share his feelings, and most importantly, telepathic, so that he can read what you want and what you actually mean, despite what you're actually saying, and so that you can get mad at him
So
about
Mel
it later.
Gibson.
What?
What women
I'm,
want? Mel Gibson?
Oh, yes.
oh, okay. Ooh, there was
I
a
was
path
thinking the
there.
real person, and I was
Yeah,
like,
I was like, what? Help me, Tom Cruise, put out the fire with your black magic.
I mean, if you watch some of his early stuff, man.
And so yeah, it is.
I don't want to
You're
have to
talking
tell
about
you. I want you to know.
yeah, you're talking about men that are portrayed as so, I heard you talking about Tamlin earlier, and again, he is portrayed as this piece of shit in the books. I think that dude got a hell of a bad rap because she came to him and constantly was like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm a prisoner in this fucking utopia that he's taken me to, and all these things that he's provided for me
He
for."
did not let her become the strong,
But
independent woman that she
she
was.
begged him, begged him to defend her from the dangers of this world, and when he did, she got upset. Now, did he do it great? No. Did he do it the best he could? Yeah, because she was sitting there telling him, I'm going to go run off and get killed, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And then he stopped her, and that made him the bad guy.
But he didn't work to make
he
her
did
better. He didn't
her.
work to understand her trauma. He was just like, you like paints. Here you go, bitch.
Yeah. Well, no, and when you
He
read the
didn't teach
books,
her how
that's
to read.
the big kicker is in the books that he was never in love with her. Like, it was never supposed to be a thing. She was always a means to an end in the way that kind of came down. And don't get me wrong, I don't defend this character. Like, I am definitely not in the Tamlin fan club that I'm like, oh, justice for the Spring Court. No, I'm not.
I think Lucian deserves justice.
I agree. He's also not from the Spring Court, but
Adopted.
But yeah, so what made Tamlin such a piece of shit and such a villain and somebody that every reader hates so much is because he didn't let the main protagonist run away and get killed.
He
That was his
didn't
big
know
sin.
he watched her go through the gauntlet under the mountain and was still like, and she received, spoilers, all of the powers from all of the courts, and he still said, she is the most powerful entity now that what's her name's gone. And he was like, you can't do anything. I don't want to talk about your feelings. I think to me, Tamlin's biggest flaw was the fact that he said, no, I don't really want to talk about your feelings. I have shit to do. We're not going to talk about the fact that you got your neck snapped.
Yeah, and he definitely had qualities because he also has a temper issue, right? He has
But
control issues.
there's a fan theory that I can't remember the lady's name who was under the mountain. It's
Amarantha.
Amarantha. I love the theory that Amarantha is his fated mate, and he was just like struggling against it because she was such a bad person, and he just like internal loathing cycle, and then took it out on Feyre. So I
Yeah.
like that theory.
See, I could get behind that. Well, and my thing is, the only part about Tamlin that really I rebelled against in his writing was the fact that you have a dude here. Again, major spoilers for the book for anybody that's reading. You have a dude here that the whole reason he even had the protagonist with him to begin with was to try to break a curse. He didn't love her. He didn't think she was the bee's knees. He needed somebody to break the stupid magic spell. That's what he needed. That's all he wanted. And then later they try to write him as this like hyper jealous territorial kind of figure, which was never part of his personality in the first two books.
I think it was because he hated Rhysand.
Yeah,
like
I think that's what it is.
Was more,
I think it's
I just hate this guy. I don't want him to have my toy.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it is, and that's why I'm not part of the Tamlin like fan club, is because do I think he got done dirty? Absolutely. Do I think he's worth defending? Well, no, he's a piece of shit. But he's not a piece of shit for what the majority of readers, I think he's a piece of shit for.
I'm not going to be sad if he doesn't get a redemption arc.
I don't think he should. I really don't. I think at best, if I was writing these books, and again, I haven't finished it yet, but at best, what I would do for Tamlin is I would write in a slow regrowth of his power. That would be it. He would never be back on top of the hill. And you know what? At best, and I'm talking if for whatever reason I'm still making money after 16 books, I might throw a blurb into a chapter about him finding somebody to continue his line and then calling it done. And
the
that actually
Spring Court will survive.
Yeah, the Spring Court survives to Tamlin, whatever.
And somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, and then somehow Palpatine returns. But that's another trope that we find.
Story.
And
somehow
so we see a lot of tropes in these style of books where you have, kind of like you said, it's the mate, it's the fated bond, it's the whatever intelligence governs the universe has decreed that these two shall be lovers forevermore. And I hate that. It drives me insane. I think it's such a lazy, terrible narrative tool to take something as complicated and tumultuous and difficult as love and boil it down to God said so, or the universe cast a spell.
I think it's not so much God said so, the universe casts some spell magic. It's a validation that your personalities match and that your values match, is how I read them. It's, okay, this person has found, if you think of people like jigsaw pieces, this person has found the one that they just clink in with. Now, in reality, do I believe that there are soulmates out there? No, I think you have a soul type of person. So it could be like there's not just, there's so many billions of people. You're going to tell me there's one person out there?
Yeah,
I think there's one ideal.
I think there is an ideal.
Forever be. There's one particular one, but we're human. We're not like we're.
I think it's a type though. It's not like one specific person.
I think there's one.
And when you start examining on the social level versus the narrative level, I'm going to focus on the narrative tool at the time. And that's when you deal with a soulmate mechanic in your book, it feels lazy to me. It does. It feels incredibly lazy. If you're going to try to capture something as valuable and precious and ephemeral as love in a book.
But they don't know they're fated mates until halfway through the series, usually.
Whatever. You know, it's just like in Twilight where Homeboy bonds to like the newborn or whatever. And it's just, it gets skeevy.
What?
Oh, well, spoiler alert for Twilight.
I never
for the record.
read Twilight. I watched one movie and I thought it was one of those like skit movies. It was not.
I can't remember most of it. I remember like the part of the bigger stuff, but like
bonds to a baby?
I don't remember that part.
It's all right. Well, I guess screw it.
The sparkly one or the werewolf?
The werewolf bonds to the sparkly one's daughter. Yeah,
I don't think I like
chew on that for a while. And Bones brought it up earlier. I have a whole theory that I picked up. I forget who wrote it originally, about how it's actually a story about Mormon angels. Vampires just a convenient tag. We can get into that, but it gets real sticky real fast.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go ahead and backpedal instead and
Good call.
tell you that's now when it comes to real life and as far as the soulmates and stuff kind of goes, I do think that there is a element to it that's ineffable, that's
I don't know what that
unexplainable,
means.
that
Unexplainable.
unexplainable,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't believe that it has anything to do with a one or even an ideal one. I think there is an ideal setup. I think what it actually is, if you start dealing with, like, let's add a little bit of magic to our real life here. I think soulmate is a convalescence of circumstance that led to a perfect moment. That's what I think soulmate is. I don't think it has anything really to do with the two individuals involved. I think it's more a description of the circumstance, and that's the way I write it in my books. If I'm going to do a soulmate, love at first sight kind of moment, it's not going to have anything to do with he's the perfect one or she's the perfect one. It's going to be the circumstances aligned. Maybe it's just as simple as the sunlight shone through a window in just the right way.
So
to
right
make
time, right place.
Yeah, it's a right time, right place kind of deal. And that's where the ideal thing that I agree with earlier kind of falls in. It's ideal circumstance. A large part of the reason I don't believe in a true soulmate is because of the way things go. I met my wife in 2004. We were both still in high school. And I've been married to her. Let's see, July 7th will be, 23 years I've been married to my wife. I am not anywhere near the same person I was at 16
But
or
do you have the
22.
same core values?
My core personality has shifted. And if I'm going to change that much, then the soul bonding thing would have been much larger than what they're portrayed as. Does that make sense? And so when I write it into a book,
Well, you were
that's
allowed to change because you were fated mates, so that's
yeah,
why
it
it worked out.
just worked out.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't difficult at all, and I don't have
No.
any agency in any of those actions. My effort didn't actually mean anything.
Nope.
It was the universe.
It was.
And that's where I draw the line.
I worked hard for this, damn it.
I want some fucking credit.
You still had to make it work.
That's what he's saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it wasn't magic and fairy dust.
Some of it was. I
I
also don't think most people will ever meet their soulmate. But anyways, that's a totally different thing.
That's a whole different topic. Now, when we're dealing with it in the books, that the reason that narrative bothers me so much, I'm going to use ACOTAR. In point fact, I'm going to try to keep it as vague and spoiler-free as I can. When you start dealing with the mate aspect, okay. Firstly, and frustratingly, only Fae get mates. Humans don't bother. Like, there's no mating anything with
Because they're not magical.
They're not magic.
Yeah.
They don't live that long.
And yet, when through a series of circumstances that have never happened before, when a half a dozen humans get turned into Fae, they all snap with mate bonds immediately.
They got
maybe
crazy
that's why
proximity.
Maybe that's why it's so hard for Fae to find mates, is because half of them are human. It's just they can't figure it out because they don't live that long. Because you don't want to be mated to somebody who only lives less than 100 years when you live like 500 less. So like maybe that's why they're so scarce, is because we just need to start swapping people to Fae and they'd be a lot more mates. That's all I'm saying. And why I go looking for fairy ring. No, I'm kidding.
Or the author wanted to catch this ephemeral, they were meant to be together with a stroke of a pen, and then wanted a reason to induce a hyper libido fever to ensure that children were born, so that she could write about it in the books. Like, that's
Makes
all
sense.
that is.
You're sounding kind of salty about this.
Yeah. I want to capture the we were meant to be together, destiny chose us aspect in the laziest, least effort way possible.
But see, the thing is you're reading smut.
A snap, that's my mate. Only one. When the two turn, only one snaps.
What do you mean snaps? Like,
only
like
one instantly goes, that's my mate.
in the
And
universe,
you
there
don't
is
even know if
something.
he's lying.
Yeah, there's something called a mate bond in the universe, and it's when two people are in proximity to one another. Suddenly, they know they were destined by the
I'm
universe or the
so proud
cauldron or
because
whoever.
the orange book is going to change your perspective a little bit because it's not always instant.
So, and you can see it on low scales, and you can see when people are trying to hide it. I also had a lot of frustration in the book because it's only the males that like
I did
suffer it,
notice that, or who
like
notice it.
who notice it, and I think that's
Makes
dumb.
sense.
Like the women just don't realize they're part of a mate bond for whatever reason.
They can't choose a restaurant, so it makes sense they can't choose a mate.
Oh, but here's
Just
the best
throwing it
part:
out there.
the bond only solidifies if the female accepts it, if she chooses it,
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
because
is
no is
fine. I'm
no.
down with that.
So this is the
but
new.
that's only in that book series.
Yeah, see, so that's the way she works. Is women can't choose restaurants, so they obviously can't pick a mate.
Yeah.
And then no
And
is
that
no,
now
I'm
so
this
they
is
don't
so
want it.
excited for all the hate mail you're
oh man, I'm so like I can't wait to see the comments section on these videos because they are going to tear me a new asshole. And I invite that. Please, guys, tell me how I'm wrong. Hit us up in the comments section. We are everywhere. We're on Twitch. We're on
That's
YouTube.
also a trope,
Linktree.
so right on topic.
Oh yeah. Hey, euphemism. Oh God, we needed a counter in the screen.
I'm not fancy enough for that. Just
Yeah.
letting you know, my
And
editing
so
I don't know.
skills.
you
I
do
don't know how
find.
long we.
Oh yeah. I've dropped in and out, so I don't know what our timer is. Given a look at the clock, we are coming up on the end of our episode here. So, all right, Clark, we've given our recommendations. We've talked about ACOTAR and similar series, and we've talked about many of the major tropes that have popped up in Romantasy and the quote-unquote smut stack that sits next to everybody's bed at night. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Oh, well, actually, can you close with, if you could, why should like someone that enjoys fantasy pick this up? Like, give your like elevator style pitch of like what
Okay, 30-second
what
elevator
is
ride. You got it.
the big grab to the universe of Roma
So,
fantasy or whatever.
obviously,
Romantasy.
anybody
Romantasy?
that's looking romance fantasy.
All right, Clark.
Oh, I was gonna let Ryan seem to be like ready to
Oh,
go.
well, mine comes at it from a little bit of a different angle because, firstly, anybody that's looking at romance or fantasy is already going into it seeking something outside of reality. They're looking for an escape, and that's what romantasy is. It's escapism. It is idealism. It is wish fulfillment, and more than anything, it's cozy. It's an easy read, right? There are good guys, there are bad guys. It doesn't get much more complicated than that. And the rest of it can kind of be taken or left when it comes to the story as you see fit. And so my big pitch to anybody that's looking to get into romantasy is know why you're doing it. I recommend doing it when you are looking for something that is comfortable. This is a comfortable genre.
I can't wait for you to read the Throne of Glass series, where like the last 100 pages of every book is basically your stomach fever pitch dropping. That's the most anxiety-inducing book series I've ever read. Fantastic, but so much anxiety.
Oh, so I am going to close before we get to Clark's elevator argument here. Clark, my
Yes.
dearest, my darling, head of our smart reading department.
Uh-oh.
I want you to read a book series for me. It's
Oh,
3
no.
books. Fourth
Is
one
it
comes out later this
Sisters
year.
of the
No, that one's a super easy read. You'd kill that one in a weekend, like the whole series. Like, I want you to read The Locked Tomb by Tamsin
Oh, is
Muir.
this the one that Descent into Madness
Yes,
kind of vibe? I
this is
can't trust the narrator.
this is an unreliable narrator in it's space necromancer lesbians, and I highly recommend it.
Wow.
All right. I do believe it's on my TBR from the last time you recommended it, but I will scoot it up on my Goodreads.
yes, I really want to talk to you about it before you have to take a break. Like,
Okay.
I highly encourage it. All right, so let's pitch to Eric. Make him read.
Pitch to the audience too, you know.
I mean, I'm going to come at this from like my skewed view, where for a lot of my life I've read kind of like the male fantasy of it, like Lord of the Rings. A guy and all of his best friends go on a great quest. And I was just like, hey, in reality, yes, it's probably mostly men in the military in that high fantasy realm, but it's like, for me, it's really nice to see this like broad spectrum of real people. Like,
That's true.
even the females have their flaws that they have to work through. The males have their flaws that they have to work through. And it, to me, it encompasses it female empowerment far better than, hold on real fast, my cat's about to do something shady. He really likes jumping up on top of my Lego shelf, and no. So like, for me, it encompasses like female empowerment far more than that Marvel scene in Endgame where it's like a bunch of girls get together on the battlefield magically. No other person is going to come help them, and they're just like, she's got her girls. And I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, Spider-Man's right there. Captain America doesn't need Captain Marvel doesn't need your goddamn help. She's the strongest one on this battlefield.
Yep, she's got more mojo than Thor.
Do? And like female, the Iron female lady, I can't remember her.
Rescue.
Is that what she becomes?
No,
like, her hero name is Rescue.
She just got the suit. Pepper Potts just got the suit, and you're telling me she's flying around like that? That was not empowering to me. That was just lazy pandering. Like, to me, this is like empowering writing where it's like people have their flaws. Bad stuff is going to happen to them. The world building is fantastic. So it's like, not only do I get a good story, I get the feels. Like, I just get everything I want in one bucket. So it's like, a lot of the times, like, the ones that aren't just true smut for smut's sakes, like, the romance part of it does make sense in the storyline. It's not just, and I tripped and fell and blah.
And now I'm pregnant.
Yeah. It's not like that. It's like, it actually makes sense in the storyline, in the world. And like I was talking earlier, like, Sarah Moss has done, I think, an incredible job of like making this multiverse where her different series stack on top of each other, and you can see hints to them. So it comes up with like, the fan theories are insane, and I think that's what I enjoy the most about them, is like just hearing the insane fan theories that come with them, because they're even more wild than the book. And I enjoy that aspect. So to me, it's just like fully encompassing, great storytelling, great world building, and like real characters from all fronts. And in most of the times, you get multi points of view. So it'll swap chapter to chapter from FMC to MC's point of view to maybe a side character's view. So you get a truly 360-degree view of like what's going on in this world. It's not just somebody like, la la la, everything I do is great. And then the next chapter is like, this bimbo just swapped through the poison marsh, and she's just like, la 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 la. So like, it gives you a holistic idea. It's just all encompassing, very entertaining. And it's just a little bit, it's fantasy with a little bit of spice. Who doesn't want that?
I agree with that assessment. I think you really hit the nail on the head on that one.
Shimmy, shimmy.
For sure.
That's why I think you should read it, Eric.
Touching naughties.
And everybody in our audience, even if you are listening after the fact, we want to hear what you think. We talked about some of our recommendations and some of the modern popular works, some of the ones that we fell in love with. Which one did you fall in love with? What did we get wrong? So, engage in all that fun algorithm stuff for me. Hit the like button, give us a comment. Let us run on mute in the background as a tab. It's all the same to us. So
I want fight me.
I want you to listen.
You can fight me on why Iron Flame is a really, really good book. I don't think it is. She's got one more chance in the Imperium series, Rebecca Yaris, to make me believe in you again.
But yeah, so hit us up. All of our stuff's in the link tree. Primarily, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And with that, we're going to go ahead and bring this episode on Romantasy to a close.
I do want to say, I would like to see some Pokemon stuff with Pikachu. Anything with that would be cool.
Like a Romantasy
with Pikachu? That's some Wet Hot Allosaurus summer stuff. See? Like, you're going to have to get a hold of Chuck Tingle for that one.
You know what? I bet you there's furry fan fiction.
I guarantee it. We're going to cover
See?
fan fiction in a future episode, guys. That's why we didn't cover it tonight.
And furry
That's
stuff, probably.
That's
I have
a
a friend
whole
who's a
different egg to
furry.
crack.
So
I have a
King
friend who
could
writes
come
fan
on.
fiction. So,
Oh, perfect. They can hang out.
but with that, guys, we're going to go and bring this episode to a close. This has been our recent excursion into Romantasy. We are crossing the Nerdverse, and we'll catch you next time, guys.
Use.